Well, hello. We're just getting all of our software hooked up here, and we're going to connect very shortly, and we'll begin. There we are. Looks like we're all interfacing right now. Excellent. Okay, so there we go. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm Amber Bocknek. I am one of the physicians here at Thrive Metaesthetics and Wellness in Aurora. And you are watching another episode of Longevanity. It is the intersection of basically healthy living and longevity from the inside out. So I'm very happy to have you here with us today. Just before we dive in, it's really important that we just review. Anything we talk about here today is not intended to be personal medical advice. It really is meant as an educational platform to bring up what's new and what's being discussed out there in the health and wellness space, and to stimulate you to ask good questions of your own care providers and help you get the care that you need. So nothing that we talk about here is intended to be personal direction for you, the viewer, but really it's meant as an educational platform, and in that mind, it's not intended to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any disease. So please always engage in anything you hear here under the direct supervision of your regular care provider. So with that said, let's get started. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think one of the biggest things I want to talk about is something that is coming up super soon, and that is our Thrive Summit. So I'm trying to be very technical here. I have scanned, if you can see it, our little QR code. So if you have a smartphone there, if you put your camera on, you can actually scan that QR code, and it should bring you to our ticket site for our Thrive Summit. I have to show you what I got this week. I got my shipment of our new book, Hot Flash to Hot Damn. So we are going to be focusing an evening. Part of it, of course, as you may have gathered from the title of the book, is going to be in and focused on women's health and hormone management through the perimenopause and the menopause. So again, perimenopause, interestingly, affects much younger women than you may think. And perimenopause is a poorly defined time. Basically, it means around the menopause. So that's not really a helpful, diagnosis to be told, oh, you're perimenopausal. But it can be up to 10 years before actual full menopause. So for some women, that's like 30 something. So surprisingly earlier than you may think. And it comes on very subtly. So sometimes it can just be occasional, irregular time frame of your cycles, but it can be more than just period I can't talk today. More than just period irregularities. It can actually affect how you sleep. So sometimes you sleep better, sometimes not as well. It can give you brain fog, irritability, physical symptoms, like sometimes you can get a lot of breast tenderness or PMS symptoms prior to your cycle where you never used to have it before, joint aches and pains that don't really fit with any injury, and all kinds of different things. So it's a time of life where hormones are fluctuating. One of the inherent challenges is that the hormones go through different levels throughout a woman's cycle and vary from woman to woman. So the key message here is there's a lot of variability from person to person, and even in the same person during various points in their menstrual cycle, as to what normal is and what it looks like. There's some general reference ranges, but again, lots of individual variability. And so if someone can get their hormones tested, which is not generally considered a standard of care, and if you're in Canada watching this, standard of care is sort of these overarching governing principles that most doctors follow that follow the evidence-based guidelines, which in theory sounds great, but it's a bit of a rigid framework or a quasi-rigid framework from which a lot of medical decision making is made. Even around things like blood work. Do we do it? Do we not? Is it supported by documentation to show it's beneficial, or is it not? So this is where sometimes the way we try to scientifically approach things can sometimes work for us, but can sometimes become part of the problem. In order to generate evidence for clinical guidelines, you have to try different things to figure out what works and what doesn't. And so sometimes there is a considerable delay between when we suspect we may need to change or do something differently. And when we finally have enough data tabulated, evaluated, and published, where we can say, okay, yeah, we should be doing this differently, or we should be doing that, or should be looking at it this way versus not. So there really can be a substantial amount of time. And that's a good thing, because we don't rush off, doing things that are not helpful or even potentially harmful. But it's a bad thing, because sometimes it can be a reason not to do something where there may be a logical reason to do so. And this is where individualized, personalized care becomes important. And personalized care, in theory, should supersede just general practice guidelines. So the person's individual context, and what's that? Well, that would be their personal medical history, their family history, and what their symptoms are, and what's changed. Is there something different now than what was going on before? So we need to really look at these personal variables and take that and mix that with clinical practice guidelines in order to come up with the best approach to evaluate women and evaluate patients in general. So this is one of the difficulties. So here we come full circle back to perimenopause. So perimenopause just really means, again, around the menopause. Sometimes we see certain blood markers with that. There's something called anti-Mullerian hormone, and that can change a little bit over the woman's life cycle, declining with age and loss of ovarian reserve. So sometimes that can be a reasonable marker to take a look at the fact that just things are changing. But when it comes to the day-to-day experience for that woman, it really doesn't give us much data. So other things we can do is evaluate the hormones traditionally through blood work, by doing blood work at various points in the cycle and sometimes repeating it from cycle to cycle. We can also look at some functional health tests. There are lab tests that look at urine metabolites and saliva levels, and again, taking that into context along with the other variables to get a more detailed picture of the individual. And from there, then we can start to put something together as far as a care plan. So that's one end of the difficulties, just the evaluation of it. It's hard to evaluate. We really don't have good clinical practice guidelines at all. There is no evidence-based method to do this, and so women tend to sometimes historically fall between the cracks here because there is no set standard. So without it, in the absence of it, this is what happens. The second part of the problem is, even if we evaluate it, there really aren't clear guidelines as to what to do about it. So some women during this stage are actually experiencing physical and psychological changes related to lower hormone levels. And hormones are chemical messengers. They tell our body what to do and how, and again, it communicates. Estrogen and progesterone, likewise testosterone and DHEA and the other hormones, don't just necessarily have receptors in the sex organs. So estrogen and progesterone, for example, do not just have receptors in your uterus or your ovaries, you have receptors all over your body. They're in your brain, which is why we see some of this cognitive impact. They're in your bones, they're in other organs, your skin, etc. And so when those levels fall, you can have changes. You can feel more anxious or more irritable or have problems with sleeping. Or certain parts of the month, if you're perimenopausal, you're still cycling, but things aren't quite the same. You may find that different parts of your cycle, you have bigger deficiencies than other times. So you might be okay for half of the month and then you're not. So again, things can vary a little bit, and this variability sometimes makes pattern recognition difficult. So then what to do about it? Well, again, here there's a lack of solid information. Certainly there's a lack of, good studies that people can point to and say, well, do this or do that. And so where there's this void, it's sort of been filled up with, well, we just simply don't treat it. That's something I think in healthcare we need to challenge. I think, again, we need to look at the individualized situation of each patient and what symptoms they're having, and then see if we have ways to support their unique biology. So one such hypothetical approach is actually to offer some estrogen and or progesterone to women prior to full menopause. So some of these women start to have relative deficiencies in some of these hormones, and One of the first ones to actually drop is often progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone that is released after ovulation. And again, ovulation is one of those things that kind of starts to fail towards the end of the ovarian's functional time frame. You know, those little eggs are getting older as we're getting older, and so the quality of them isn't as good. And when they're doing what they're kind of supposed to be doing through the course of their life cycle, they don't always create a situation where there's as much progesterone on board. So this is one of the more common scenarios where we see either an absolute loss of progesterone, there's just not any produced, or there's a relative loss. So relative to the amount there was before, there's not as much because the egg quality, and then of course the little corpus luteum, if you remember back to health class, after the egg is ovulated, the little bed that the egg came from becomes this gland structure called the corpus luteum, and that's where progesterone comes from. So again, sometimes that declines, and sometimes there's an imbalance. Sometimes, again, these things need to kind of balance each other. So sometimes you can have progesterone on board, but you've got too much estrogen relative to the amount of progesterone you have. And here again, we can have a situation where people just don't feel right. So the story of hormones is kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You need the porridge to be just right. Not too hot, not too cold. In this situation, not too high, not too low, and in balance. So it's complicated. And a further complicated, again, your living situation, your stress level, cortisol, these things are like real. They're legit, and they can really affect how you feel and how these hormones impact on you. So this is sort of one of the challenges in women's health, and trying to be more supportive and a little more proactive about it, and really taking that customized shared decision making based on an individual's unique medical history and unique set of circumstances into consideration. This is how we can really carve out a better path. So we have our upcoming Thrive Summit coming up again, and that is going to be on the 22nd. So that is a week from today, actually. And we're going to really deep dive into this. And that little pile of books that I have here, these little guys, yay! We're going to be giving one of these out to everybody who attends that night. So if you do come, you'll get an advanced copy. The book launch is actually going to be that evening. So again, if you're joining us, we will be actually going into live for the full book at that point. So right now I just have a few advanced copies. So we'll be giving those out to everybody who attends. So the Thrive Summit is going to be here in Aurora, and that is next Wednesday, April the 22nd. The doors are going to open at 5:30. Now, when the doors open, that's our exhibit hall area. We're going to have a fun night of like touch, feel, and do. And I have some of my different vendors coming, and they're going to bring stuff with them, so you can kind of try it. I've got some folks coming with a skincare analysis that does some computer-assisted evaluations, and then gives you this neat little printout that you can take home or have emailed to you, and it kind of outlines a bunch of different things about your own skin. So it's kind of neat. Get some customized precision stuff for yourself. And we have the folks from Althera coming. So again, if you notice a little sag and you want to learn a little more about skin tightening, we have that there. We're going to have the V-Pulse chair there, which is for pelvic floor strengthening. And this is a non-invasive thing, so don't worry. When people hear pelvic, they think like a pap test. So this is not an exposy kind of thing. You're fully clothed. We sit you on the chair, and it makes your little pelvic floor muscles contract, along with vasodilating and increasing circulation and a bunch of other little good things. So we'll have that there. So if you are adventurous and you'd like to have a little seat, you can check out what that's like, and again, a bunch of other stuff. So all of that will be that evening. There will be presentations. We're going to cover a fair bit on this hormone health that I've just alluded to here, but we're going to start zoomed in and then zoom out. By zoomed in, we're going to talk a little bit about cellular health and function. This is sort of trying to get to some of the root causes of aging, what's actually happening cell to cell as we get older, and what can we do to slow that trajectory down a little and maybe optimize our health so that we have our best quality of life going forward. So we're going to start really microscopically zoomed in, then we'll zoom out a little and look at hormones as messengers and all the roles they play together. Then we're going to zoom out a little further, looking at a systems level, and we're going to really evaluate, okay, what happens as you get older to systems naturally and historically, the cardiovascular system, the brain, other parts of the body, and we're going to see what we can do to give some good tips and pearls to try to slow that process down so everyone can live their best life. So I'm really hoping you can join us again. Here is our little QR code for tickets. Tickets are $20 for the evening. And that's actually for 2 people, because fun things should be shared, and they're always more fun when you do it with a friend. So this is for you and a bestie, whether that's a significant other or colleague or a sister or, sister from another mister. Everybody is welcome. So again, hopefully you can join us. We'd love to see you there. And we are going to explore next steps in longevity and quality of life. So that's it for today. It's just a little short one. Everybody's getting ready now for the Thrive Summit next week, and I hope to see you there. Thanks so much for watching. And again, if you have any questions or you'd like tickets, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a wonderful day.